Welcome to History Channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. In post-war California, strength and femininity redefined norms as Relna Brewer-McRae and Abby Stockton performed an impressive lift of 100-pound Melo Globe barbells on Santa Monica's beach. Stockton, known as the Queen of Muscle Beach, inspired a generation of women to see fitness as empowerment rather than spectacle. At Ellis Island in 1920, newly arrived immigrants stood anxiously before doctors conducting eye exams for trachoma, a contagious disease feared for its potential to deny entry. The small metal hook lifting eyelids became a symbol of both medical vigilance and the harsh scrutiny of the American dream. During World War I, American soldiers relied on massive acoustic locators, mechanical ears of steel, to detect distant aircraft. Before radar's invention, these strange horn-like devices helped pinpoint enemy bombers by sound alone, marking a brief but ingenious era of early military listening technology. In Vietnam, 1968, an army priest stood in the jungle wearing a cassock patterned in camouflage. Amid chaos and fire, he offered prayers and last rites, blending faith with the battlefield, a haunting reminder that even in war, some sought to bring spiritual comfort to soldiers in despair. On September 9, 1966, at Long Beach Naval Station, the Apollo test capsule was carefully unloaded from the USS Hornet. The scene symbolized America's growing ambition in space exploration, bridging the gap between early test missions and the eventual triumph of the Apollo moon landings. Captured in 1944 by Soviet photographer Emanuel F. Zarikin, "Stand to the End" immortalized defiance amid the ruins of Stalingrad. The image shows resilience rising from destruction, a visual anthem to those who refused surrender in one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War. In 1981, a train rolled across the South African landscape, framed by vast plains and a nation still bound by apartheid. The railway connected cities and people yet divided lives through invisible lines of race and privilege, a silent journey through a divided country's industrial pulse. A shepherd from Karakhechti, Azerbaijan, stands proudly with his children in the 1980s, their faces marked by wind and endurance. Behind them, the rugged landscape mirrors their life of simplicity and strength, portrait of pastoral resilience amid the shifting tides of Soviet rural life. On October 11, 1994, the Space Shuttle Columbia, carried atop NASA's shuttle carrier aircraft, performed a flyby honoring the recently landed Endeavour at Edwards Air Force Base. The rare sight symbolized human achievement, two spacecraft meeting briefly in the sky before one retired to history. In 1942, Imperial Japanese soldiers advanced through North China, setting fire to a village as part of the brutal three-alls policy: kill all, burn all, loot all. The smoke that rose marked not just destruction, but the moral devastation of total war upon innocent civilians. On December 12, 1980, Mark David Chapman, accused assassin of John Lennon, was escorted under tight security back to Bellevue Hospital. Cameras flashed as his lawyer withdrew from the case, leaving the world to stare at the silent man whose act had ended a generation's peace anthem. In May 1950, the White House stood gutted, its outer shell preserved while the entire interior was stripped bare for reconstruction. The image revealed a paradox: America's most iconic residence hollowed to its bones, standing as both a symbol of renewal and the fragility of tradition. Grace Kelly's wedding day, April 19, 1956. captured a fairy tale turned reality. The Hollywood actress became Princess of Monaco, her serene elegance transforming global imagination. Her gown, adorned with lace and pearls, symbolized timeless grace, the union of cinema's glamour with European royalty's enduring mystique. In February 1941, Erzsébet's town hall and market square lay under the shadow of German occupation. The cobblestone streets, once lively with merchants, were subdued by soldiers' boots and banners of domination, a frozen glimpse of Poland's endurance beneath the weight of war and foreign rule. In 1967, actress Maggie de la Riva confronted her wealthy attackers in court, pointing at them while revealing her bruises. Her courage broke silence in a nation long bound by fear and class privilege, turning her pain into a landmark fight for justice and women's dignity. In 1869 Philadelphia, members of the Knights of Labor posed together, one of America's earliest and most influential labor unions. They represented workers from all trades, united in their demand for fair wages and humane conditions, a movement that would ignite the broader struggle for labor rights. In 1960, photographer Alberto Corta captured Che Guevara's Guerrillero Hiroko, a moment of defiant calm framed by revolution. The image became one of the most reproduced portraits in history, transforming a man into an enduring symbol of rebellion, struggle, and the romantic ideal of freedom. In the 1960s, a bustling flea market in Hamburg offered relics of post-war Europe old records. Furniture, uniforms, and memories traded under gray skies. Each item carried whispers of history, turning simple bargains into fragments of a continent, rebuilding its identity through the commerce of the past. In 1967 at Bluff Creek, Northern California, Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin captured the infamous Bigfoot footage. The shaky film ignited decades of debate, inspiring both believers and skeptics to search for truth in the forests, a mystery forever embedded in American folklore. In 1951, mob boss Frank Costello, known as the Prime Minister of the Underworld, testified before the Kefauver Committee. As cameras rolled, his trembling hands revealed the pressure of exposure organized crime. Once hidden in shadows, was now dragged into the blinding light of national scrutiny. In April 1992, an open-air market in Moscow's Izmailovsky Park bustled with vendors and newly liberated citizens. After the Soviet Union's collapse, capitalism arrived in makeshift stalls. Freedom expressed through trade, where old badges, toys, and relics became the first commodities of a changed world. In 1981, French singer Françoise Hardy was immortalized in a promotional postcard by Florinash Records. Her calm elegance, framed by minimalist style, embodied a new wave of European chic music and fashion, blending seamlessly into the cool, introspective aesthetic that defined a generation of modern icons. In late 1916, Austro-Hungarian river monitors engaged Romanian forces along the Danube. These armored vessels, part warship and part floating fortress, thundered across the river's surface. Their battles echoed through Europe's waterways, symbolizing a fading empire's struggle to maintain dominance in the chaos of the Great War. In May 1939, twin sisters peered from a porthole aboard the SS St. Louis. A Jewish refugee ship denied entry to Cuba and the United States. Their hopeful faces pressed to the glass became a haunting image of humanity turned away on the eve of the Holocaust. In 1917, John Spears, leader of the Green Corn Rebellion, set for his mugshot a defiant farmer turned rebel. He and hundreds of poor, multiracial Oklahomans had risen against U's involvement in World War I. Their failed march marked one of America's forgotten uprisings against war and inequality. In 1944, Estonian volunteers fighting alongside Finnish forces on the Karelian Isthmus displayed quiet defiance. One soldier painted flowers on his helmet, another bore the Estonian tricolor. Amid the brutal war between Finland and the Soviet Union, these small symbols reflected pride, resistance, and a longing for national identity. On January 28, 1959, Yuri Yudin hugged Lyudmila Dubinina goodbye as Igor Dyatlov stood nearby. Yudin turned back due to illness, unknowingly escaping fate. Within days, all 9 of his companions would die mysteriously in the Ural Mountains, in what became known as the Dyatlov Pass Incident. In 1944, Private Eugene V. Weber knelt to hand a small girl a stick of chewing gum in liberated Esselborn, Luxembourg. The child's shy smile contrasted with the ruins behind them. A brief and tender moment of humanity amid the devastation of World War II. Around 1946, Captain Herbert Sobel, remembered for his harsh leadership in the Band of Brothers, held his infant son in a quiet, domestic scene. Away from the battlefield, the stern officer appeared softened by fatherhood, a rare glimpse of vulnerability behind the uniform and legend. In 1983, Princess Diana met her favorite band, Duran Duran, at a charity event. Her genuine enthusiasm and natural charm captivated both musicians and press. The encounter reflected her connection to popular culture and her role as a modern royal who bridged the gap between monarchy and youth. In 1948 Kentucky, a court clerk examined a small cabin where 37-year-old Raymond Ellison had lived with his 12-year-old wife, Imogene Sims, married to escape statutory rape charges. Ellison was later arrested for her murder. The disturbing case exposed deep flaws in rural law enforcement and child protection. At the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, American sprinters Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised black-gloved fists on the medal podium. Their silent black power salute became one of the most powerful symbols of protest in sports history, highlighting racial injustice and civil rights struggles in the United States. In October 1962, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war as President John F. Kennedy examined U-2 reconnaissance photos revealing Soviet missiles in Cuba. The tense standoff that followed, known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, brought humanity closer to atomic conflict than ever before. In November 1963, the Oval Office appeared serene with its red rug and polished furniture, unaware of the tragedy to come. Just days later, President John F. Kennedy would be assassinated in Dallas, leaving behind this quiet room as a haunting reminder of leadership abruptly ended. In 1891, the body of Dom Pedro II, Brazil's last emperor, lay in exile after his overthrow. Crowned at just 6 years old, he ruled for nearly 60 years. A scholar and polyglot, he was admired for his intellect and humility, even in his final days far from home. Photographed in Geneva in 1898, Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known as Sissi, walked quietly with her lady-in-waiting. Unaware of the camera, she appeared elegant yet distant. This candid image became her last, taken moments before she was fatally stabbed by an anarchist, sealing her legend in tragic beauty. A rare early 1910s photograph revealed U.S. President Woodrow Wilson's famously poor teeth, a detail often hidden in official portraits. Despite his dignified public image, this candid glimpse humanized the academic president, who would later lead the nation through World War I and the founding of the League of Nations. In 1960, President Dwight D. Eisenhower met civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr. After signing the Civil Rights Act, their conversation marked a careful but historic step toward equality, reflecting both the cautious optimism and deep divisions of a nation slowly confronting its racial injustices. In Bucharest on December 24, 1989, an anti-communist civilian aimed his PSL rifle during the Romanian Revolution. As protests escalated into open revolt, ordinary citizens took up arms against Nicolae Ceaușescu's regime, capturing the violent birth of freedom in one of Eastern Europe's final uprisings. In 1935 Boston, Maurice Mo Burke stood at the crossroads of intellect and intrigue, lawyer, baseball catcher, and secret World War II spy. Fluent in several languages, Burke gathered intelligence in Europe for the U.S. government, becoming one of the most enigmatic figures in American sports history. In 1953, an Estonian female guerrilla washed clothes by a forest stream, her rifle resting nearby. Living in hiding from Soviet authorities, these forest brothers symbolized defiance long after the war's end. Her quiet routine revealed the endurance of those who fought occupation through daily survival. On October 15, 1969, students across America marched against the Vietnam War, carrying signs and chanting for peace. They filled city streets and college campuses. The movement reflected a generation's growing disillusionment with authority, uniting millions in one of the largest demonstrations in U.S. history. In 1920, Warren G. Harding, freshly chosen as the Republican presidential nominee, stood with a tuba in hand. The image, lighthearted and unusual, contrasted sharply with the solemnity of politics, showing a rare moment of humor before he rose to the presidency during America's post-war decade. On December 1959, the leaders of France, Britain, West Germany, and the United States gathered in Paris for the Four-Power Summit. De Gaulle, Macmillan, Adenauer, and Eisenhower symbolized post-war unity amid Cold War tension, shaping Europe's fragile balance between peace, power, and ideological division. In 1944, Lieutenant R.F. Snuffy Smith of the 39th Fighter Squadron posed beside his P-38 Lightning, Japanese Sandman II. The decorated pilot's aircraft bore victory markings from the Pacific Theater, embodying the daring spirit of American airmen who fought fierce battles in the skies over World War II. In 1946 Macon, Georgia, a small child stood before robed members of the Ku Klux Klan, being indoctrinated into hate. The haunting image exposed the group's attempt to pass racism through generations, a chilling reflection of how ideology can be taught long before it is understood. In 1886 Australia, mugshots captured 6 men convicted in the Mount Rennie rape case. The brutal assault of a 16-year-old servant girl shocked New South Wales. Of 20 involved, only 10 were punished. The rare convictions marked an early, uneasy moment of justice for crimes often silenced. In Anaheim, California, 1947, 4 contestants smiled during the Halloween Slick Chick Beauty Contest. Their bright expressions masked the hardships of post-war America, where optimism and glamour became a cultural escape from years of conflict. Beauty pageants like this reflected a nation longing for normalcy and cheer. On July 18, 1970, President Richard Nixon greeted a young Prince Charles at the White House. The meeting symbolized enduring ties between the United States and the British monarchy, capturing a moment of cordial diplomacy during an era otherwise marked by global protests and political tension. In October 1948, the industrial town of Donora, Pennsylvania, was shrouded in a toxic smog later called the death fog. 26 people died and thousands fell ill. The disaster exposed the deadly consequences of unchecked pollution, becoming a turning point in America's environmental awareness and clean air movement.